Welcome to another chapter podcast with your hosts, Claire and Rebecca.
Do you love books? Well, you've come to the right place. Join us as we discuss all things books. And so on to part 2 of chapter 5 of another chapter. If you haven't already listened to part 1, we would advise that you go back now and listen, because some of what's going on here may not make sense otherwise. Enjoy! So, a book then that you wish you could wipe from your memory and start again. Oh, like the amount of books that must be that way for so many people. And I would love, actually, this is one we should ask on our stories. What would people on Instagram love to reread for the first time? But for me, it is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. And I've read this as part of a buddy read with Aoife, Little Cass Reads. It was a reread for her, and it was my first time reading it. I'm aware of the story. It has been on the Leaving Cert course previously. I'm not sure why I hadn't read it before now, because it's not a new book. But my God, this was the other book up there with Project Hail Mary, where I have wavered and gone between which would be my top read of the year. And the reason I would say Project Hail Mary is because, as I said earlier, I keep smiling when I read that book. But this book, The Remains of the Day, by God, that book has stuck with me. It's one of these books where not a lot happens as such, but there's just the emotional impact of it. Now, it is a book where, and this came up in the buddy read, some people were reading it and were like, no, this is boring. I have no connection with this character. And I could see that. I could absolutely see why. It's about Stevens, a butler, kind of one of the last of his kind, we'll say, from like the big houses in England, who is kind of nearing the end of his career. And he decides to take a trip out to see an old colleague of his. And as he's on this trip out in the car, kind of driving around the English countryside, he's reminiscing about his past and about his life working in servitude in England. And I don't want to say anymore, because it's not like there's some big massive twist or anything in it, but just kind of following along on his journey through his life, through his memories, and realising the conclusions he's coming to before he comes to them himself. It's kind of like, it was like a punch in the gut, and you just feel a bit wrung out after it, kind of emotionally. So that is one that I absolutely adored that book this year.
And I've seen that author's name come up time and time again, but I've never actually read anything by them. So, yeah,
what's on the Leaving Cert course at the moment? What is it? Never Let Me Go.
Yes, yeah.
About the boarding school, Hailsham. Yeah, that's them as well.
Okay, yeah, no, I've never read any of them. And every time I see them, I have this impression in my head that they're difficult to read. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong in saying that.
They're not actually. One of the people in the buddy read, Suzanne, described the writing in The Remains of the Day as Ishiguro, and it sums it up perfectly. It's just, in this book anyway, it's just this beautiful, kind of flawless writing that describes the emotion of it so perfectly without like hammering you over the head. It's very well done, very well done. What would be your book from this year?
I think my book would be Lessons in Chemistry. I just really loved that book. Fantastic. I listened to it on audio. The narration was fab. The storyline was excellent. I just really loved Elizabeth Zatt's character. And just the fact that she had so much determination to do what needed to be done. She had such a scientific brain, and just the way that society wanted to mold her into this woman box. This is the box that you fit in. This is the way you should behave. These are the things you should say. This is what you should do. And anything outside of that is frowned upon. And she just had such disregard for the whole lot of it that I was like, woohoo. I just really, really loved it. And yeah, as an audiobook, it was brilliant. I gave a gift of that book to a friend of mine over Christmas, and I just hope that, when you give someone a gift of a book, I think you just hope that they love it as much as what you did. And even in my 12 favourite books of the year, where you pick a book from every month, that one was the one that I was like, I kept going back to that one. I was like, that one was brilliant. So yeah, that was great. And I really enjoyed it, and I'd love to go back and start from scratch. Now, my memory, as I've said multiple times, is so bad that I possibly could pick it up and go, oh, what's happening here? But it's a great one.
That's a good thing. A good thing in a way, I suppose, even though that would mean you could end up reading the same 12 books on repeat.
I tend to, as soon as I put a book down and I've kind of processed what's gone on in it, it's like I compartmentalize, and I'm like, right, that's done, and then I don't even think about it again really, except to go, that's a fantastic book, and then someone will ask you why, and you're like, I don't know, I just remember it being brilliant. Because it is. Yeah, that's it. Our next one then is a book you couldn't put down. And I have cheated, and I have two for this one again. They're both Irish authors. They're both brilliant women. The first one is Andrea Mara, All Her Fault. It was my first Mara book, and I just inhaled it. I spoke about it earlier. I just think that you cannot fault this book. It was brilliant. And then the other one that I've put down here for this one is Where I End by Sophie White. I know that we had a chat with Sinead in chapter 2, and she also mentioned this book. I couldn't put them down for very different reasons. I think I found Where I End so shocking in the way that it was written, and the descriptions in it. It was kind of like a car crash read, in the sense that you couldn't help but keep reading because it was just so bizarre. And then All Her Fault was just so compelling because I had to get to the end and figure out who did this and who
was it all her fault.
Yes, trying to put the pieces together, I suppose. They were two for me. And I think it's great, even making out this list of books, the amount of female Irish authors that stood out for me is, I just think, phenomenal. Irish writing has had a great year. And a book that you couldn't put down, or did you pick one for that?
I did and I didn't. I tried to think, I went back through all of my list of the 700 million books I read this year, and was like, which ones could I not put down? And I realised that the two that I read the quickest, within 24 hours of picking them up, they were finished, were both by Colleen Hoover.
Okay.
I am one of the people who clearly bought two of her books to put her into 4 of the top 10 spots in Ireland this year. I totally bought into the hype.
Oh, yeah.
One of them was a buddy read.
I also have two of her books.
One of them was a buddy read. It Ends With Us, which I think was the number 1 spot in Ireland.
I think that was my first buddy read, actually.
Yeah. You were in that as well. Read it within 24 hours, but in the sense of I needed to know what happened, kind of a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my two were 2 Colleen Hoover books. So, so an underrated book then from this year. I suppose underrated kind of to me meant one that I didn't really hear anything about, that I really enjoyed, but that I don't see other people talking about it. And for me, it was one called Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. Now, this was actually the 3rd or the 4th in a series by her called the Wayfarers series. and it is sci-fi. Again, this is another series that I really surprised myself with, that I enjoyed so much, as in loved, absolutely loved. But it's set in space, and each book centers on a different person or a different creature within space. And while I don't remember exact details of this one, because you kind of have crossover characters in them and similar situations, but like we'll say it's the kind of thing where the first one is about a particular character. So it was a human who was working in space. It was like someone else that was a minor character in her story ends up being the major character in the next one, you know?
Yeah.
They're really hard to describe without reading them. But that series in general, the Wayfarers series, is absolutely fantastic. The way that Becky Chambers writes connections between characters is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Emotional connection, kind of love, just the feelings, just everything. Like, you'd be on the edge of your seat worrying about like the bad things that are happening, while also being really invested in the relationships in it, while also for a lot of the first book not having a clue what's going on, because she has created this whole world, obviously, that is not within our realm of knowledge currently. But she does an amazing job of it. And then the recurring kind of things then through the rest of the series, you get quite familiar with it, and there's a lovely comfort in recognizing different references and different things that are going on. So that particular book I'm including because it's a series I don't see enough love for, and I see very little reference to that book.
For me, it would be The Girl with the Loading Voice. Did you read that one?
Yes, I did. Great book. Abby Daré, is it?
Yeah. Yes. And I think as well, it's a book that I read that I really enjoyed, that I didn't see an awful lot about. Another Tired Mommy book club pick. And it was one that I know I mentioned in that interview as well, that I picked up going, don't know if this is going to be for me, but I really, really enjoyed it. And outside of the book club and members posting their reviews and their opinions on it, I haven't seen much about that book at all, and it is such a great piece of work that it kind of shocks me that it's not as widely known as what it possibly should be. Yeah, so that's,
like, I'm sure I listened to that one, and it's brilliantly done on audio, because it is
there's a pidgin English.
Yeah, it's kind of colloquial language or something, isn't it? And
I also listened to it on audio, and it just it read so well as an audiobook, and the narrator was fantastic, and just the emotion that was put into different situations and different characters, I thought was outstanding. Yeah. Our next category is a book that you'd gift to everyone, and these are two again that I've already spoken about, so I won't go into them in too much detail, but There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather would be my first one, by Linda McGurk, and I know that we've had an awful lot of interest from listeners on that book and the 1,000 Hours Outside challenge as a result of that conversation, so that's a fantastic thing to hear. And again, the second book that I would gift to people would be Bessborough, just because of the topic and the importance of that as our history and our culture, I suppose. You know, I'm not disregarding any male listeners that we might have, but as women, I think it's very important to hear these stories and to consider our own privilege in a sense. I'm an unmarried mother. I live with my partner and everything, but it just when I was reading it, I put it down a couple of times and just went, God almighty, like, where would I be if this had been, you know, however many years ago, and not too many years ago to be unthought of. You know, it's just, yeah, it was scary, I think. Yeah. What book would you give to everybody?
I slightly cheated again with the series here. I'm mad for shoving in as many books in here as possible. I picked a few. I would gift everyone the Bergman Brothers series. It is another romance series by Chloe Leese. I mentioned it at the end of the romance episode as a series that I loved. Centered around the Bergmans. Now, it's a Bergman brothers series, but there is sisters in it as well. It just happens to be the first few books are about brothers. So each book is centered on a different family member, a different sibling, and who they fall in love with. But what I love so much about this, as well as the fact they're just fantastic romance books, is that they cover so many different aspects in it. Like we'll say one of them is at the third or fourth one, which is about their sister. Freya is about a married couple who are, I wouldn't say falling out of love, but that there is some kind of miscommunications and stuff there, and they're genuinely trying to figure out how to get their marriage back on track, which is not something that you come across in a romance book very often, you know, and reading that as a married person was lovely. But another thing that Chloe Leese does brilliantly is her representation within her books. So there are people with different disabilities, different illnesses, people with, we'll just say, varying beliefs from different backgrounds, different sexualities. Like, they're just fantastic, and it's all really natural. Like, you know, it's not one of these like, we're including people in this for the sake of taking a visibility box or really hitting you over the head with the fact that this person is this way or whatever it is. It's done really well and very naturally, and I love that. So the Bergman brothers / sisters series, I think would be lovely for people, especially if they would like to read a bit more romance. So best audiobook then is our next one, and because I listened to so much audio this year, it was really hard to narrow this down, but what I ended up actually going with, yeah, I know, are two that I have already mentioned. So The Remains of the Day on audio is wonderful. Dominic West narrates it. So Dominic West, who is currently playing, yes, I'm sure he was. He's currently playing King Charles on The Crown, I think. But to me, Dominic West is Jimmy McNulty from The Wire. So which is how many years old now, but one of the best series I've ever watched. And he narrates it, and he does this amazing job. I could have listened to that book 10 times over just because he does such a wonderful job of it. And then Project Hail Mary is brilliant because the wit in it comes across, like the kind of droll sense of humour, the quips, it all comes across brilliantly on audio. So they are two that I would pick on audio.
I feel like my TBR is growing to be an insurmountable.
I know.
list
I'm listening to yours going, I have that now on my shelf. I'm going to bump that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I don't know if we're doing ourselves any favours.
So yours, what would be your best audiobook?
My best audiobook would probably be Daisy Jones and the Six. I don't think I actually included that in my list of books that I'd read over the year, and I don't know why. And I was kind of thinking then, I was like, had I read that last year? But you had gifted it to me and we kind of reconnected last year. So, you know, my timing was obviously wrong. But yeah that one was really well done because it just sounded like a documentary podcast about a music band. It was just really, really fun. Yeah. In different ways. Yeah. So that would be one that I would recommend. Like, there's a lot of great audiobooks out there. I think as a form of reading, it can be very much underappreciated, but it is an excellent way to get into reading and to you know, read more. And I know that we've discussed this before, but it deserves an awful lot more recognition than it tends to get by people. Reading is reading, do you know? Reading
is reading, exactly. Like, let's not be pedantic about it.
Yeah, I have very distinct memories of when I was quite young. I'm going to say 7 or 8. And the only reason that I actually remember this is because I had my first set of braces in. I had braces quite young as a child. But my brother really wanted to read a certain book, and I sat down and recorded myself, because he couldn't read at the time. I recorded myself reading the book for him so that he could listen to it when he wanted to. And I'm sure we found the tape like years later, and just the massive list with the retainers and stuff was hilarious. But it just, it meant that he was able to access a book that he couldn't actually read.
That's lovely.
The best Irish book was our next one, and I honestly could not choose, because I think the standard of Irish writing this year has been incredible. The standard of writing has been insane. It has been extremely difficult to even think about how to narrow it down as to what the best book by an Irish author has been, because for me, I've got books that are like the best fiction books, like ones that I could not put down. Where I End, All Her Fault, there's Bessborough. There's just too many for me to possibly choose one above the other, I think.
And that's a great complaint too, though, in fairness.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a great thing. Oh, and as well, I also read Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent, who is also another phenomenal Irish author. Like, Irish women are killing it with their standard of writing at the moment, and it's great to see. Do you have a best Irish book?
I have a few that I would like to mention. Two we have mentioned already. So The Colony, I just loved the story of it. As in, loved it in the sense that I was thinking about it for a long time afterwards. Hide and Seek by Andrea, another one, excellent, absolutely excellent read. And especially as the mother of young kids, it can be quite hard to read about kids going missing or whatever. Two that I really loved this year that I haven't mentioned previously. So Donal Ryan's Queen of Dirt Island. I am a big Donal Ryan fan. I have read all of his books, and they all generally all center around kind of the same rural communities. The way he writes people and writes kind of day-to-day rural life is fantastic. And I just loved that book. It was kind of an intergenerational look at different women within the one family. And the other one then that I actually only finished maybe in the last few weeks is Sarah Bowen's new book, and it's called Seven Steeples. And it is about a couple who get together and basically move to the west of Ireland, a very remote area up on a hill where apparently if you climb the top of the hill, you should be able to see 7 different steeples from the top of the hill, thus the name.
Okay.
And it is about their day-to-day life. It covers 7 years in their life. It is, again, very much a day-to-day life thing, but the way Sarah Bowen writes is stunning. Absolutely stunning. The way she describes the small details of Irish life, of rural life, of people, their actions, their reactions is astonishing. Like, I did not read anything like this year.
That's amazing.
I haven't seen a lot about it online either. I'm kind of surprised I haven't seen more, but it is a fabulous book. So this is very much like a gentle read, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I inhaled this. Yeah, so definitely that's up there for me. And our last kind of category then was a common favourite that we had when we looked back at our yearly, our monthly favourites. And the one that both of us had was the love songs of W.B. Du Bois. Did we read that at the same time? No, we didn't.
No, you'd read it before me, I think.
Were we in the same buddy read for that?
No, just because I had serious FOMO seeing all of you read that book.
We both love this. Like, this book, it's a debut novel, which is absolutely astonishing for a start. It was released in 2021, but it only kind of came, I suppose, on the books to see here, 2022. And there were a few different body reads. I was in one at one stage, you were in one kind of shortly after. And for a book that was 800 and something pages, it was incredibly readable.
It was.
I've never come across a book that is so readable for something that is so long. And everybody says it. Everybody that has read that is continually amazed at how accessible the book is and how kind of the time flies reading it.
Yes, and I think I happily would have read another 800 pages of the narrative of that book. Obviously, it discusses some and explores some very difficult topics as well. slavery in America is if you could bring it down to the most basic of terms, like that's where we start, and just how people's lives evolve from there. And it's a magical book.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And it's hard. It's very hard to describe it. Yeah.
Like our main protagonist is Ailey, Ailey Garfield, who is a young woman, and she is heading off to, we kind of see her at various stages in her life, and she's heading off to university and so on. But it goes back then, I think it's 8 generations. So like, it's an African-American family in the American South from the time before the Civil War and slavery, kind of before that, right through that civil rights movement up to the present with Ailey. Because there are so many, I suppose, family members in it and so many aspects to it. It could have been really confusing, but it wasn't, which was a testament to the writing of this.
Yes. It was very hard to put down too. Like there were times when I was reading it and like it was just a case of I just wanted to keep going, which is impossible with a book that size.
Yeah.
I didn't think that I would be able to have the discipline to read it or possibly to enjoy it, because for me, if something feels like too much of a task, I kind of not shut down, but I'm a bit like, oh God, I don't know, can I do it? And I'm doubting myself, and then I kind of just back away or whatever. But this one, it shocked me how much I loved it.
Yeah.
And the characters in it were so incredible. Like for someone to concoct this family and this history and this patchwork of generations and people, and have characters that you genuinely fall so in love with as people, and ones that you just want to like get.
Oh my God,
put it lightly. There are people that you just would abhor. She explored nearly every aspect of the human experience.
Yes, that's actually a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there was just so many characters and so many storylines and everything that she definitely tackled. Like if you think back to it, without giving any spoilers or anything here now, like modern day issues were dealt with. Like Ailey's family, I'm thinking of her sister in particular.
Yeah.
And then like if you think back to the generations, pre-Civil War and stuff that you were mentioning, the things that they were all experiencing, like for someone to be able to accurately describe all of those situations and then all of the emotions that go with them, like it's mind-blowing to think that someone has the capability of doing something like this. Like you could happily not write another book after writing this one.
And weave it all into one big story. Yeah, like that's it's incredibly skilled. It was a fantastic read. So I think that sums up our favourite reads, which are plenty, and hopefully we have given you some suggestions maybe for your 2023 reads. So we did ask our followers on Instagram what their favourite reads from 2023 were. Do you want to go through some of those, Claire? Because you did a gorgeous job of putting together some lovely charts about them, which really appealed to my inner nerd. My inner nerd, what am I talking about? My outer nerd.
Yeah.
Love a good spreadsheet.
I know. I learned how to make a pie chart for this. I'll have you know. I know I definitely did it at one stage in my past, but it didn't stick with me. But yeah. So the book that won, I'm going to say won, but it was just the one that was most mentioned, for best fiction was The Stranding by Kate Sawyer, and I've seen that one pop up on my feed time and time again, and it's
fabulous book.
It's been on my shelf for ages, and I just want to read it soon because of the amount of love that people have for that book. I don't know what it's about, except that it has something to do with whales.
Yeah. As
in like the animal, not the country. And that's all I know about it. But yeah, it seems to be a very popular book by the looks of it. Yeah, 12.1% of participants voted for The Stranding.
Excellent.
Which is great. If we move on then to the best non-fiction book, 48% of our participants voted for Bessborough by Deirdre Finnerty, which I think I've spoken an awful lot about already. The next category that we asked people to discuss or to mention was their most surprising read of the year. And just taking a quick look here, we've got Project Hail Mary, which is your baby. Where I End by Sophie White, which I would think is mine, and then a joint one for the two of us was Mad Honey.
There we go.
So those three.
And I didn't vote on this. I don't know what came
top of the pile. No, I didn't either, for the record. Yeah, we left this totally up to.
So we did not skew these results in any way.
No.
Other than me constantly talking about Project Hail Mary to people. So.
And then the last one that we asked people to tell us was their author of the year, and we have got two joint in first place. Taylor Jenkins Reid, who you've mentioned already, and people just absolutely adore her, and one of my faves, Andrea Mara, which I think is fantastic to see.
Excellent.
Andrea has a new book coming out this year. I was going to say next year, but it's this year now, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. I have asked for an advanced reading copy, and I have yet to be approved for one, so I'm hoping that I get it. But then at the same time, I remember when Hide and Seek came out, and I had read it as an advanced reading copy, and I actually had serious FOMO looking at all of these people reading it for the first time and going, God, I wish I was reading it for the first time again. So a part of me is going, what of it? If I get it, I get it, and if I don't, it'll be great when I do get to pick it up.
I better not tell you that I have it, so Claire, should I?
Oh God. I just really want to read it.
Don't be now.
Yeah, I saw somebody earlier, Sarah, put up that she said getting into bed with Andrea Mara, but not actually Andrea Mara, but her book. And I was like, I'm just so jealous. Like, I just really want to read that book. So those are our listeners' favourites of the year. They're also up on a post on our Instagram page if anybody is following us and wants to see the other books that were mentioned in those categories. We had a lot of people participate in that, for which, again, we're very grateful for, because it makes my TBR pile an awful lot bigger than what I had hoped for. But it's great to see so many great books being recommended. And it also, like, if anyone is following us and is looking to get back into reading, that post actually would be quite handy to look at, because these are all the books that people have absolutely loved. So it might give you a nice starting point, even just to take a look at the titles, give them a Google if you need to, and if they seem to be something that you might be interested in, then pick them up.
Excellent. That's a great idea, actually. Yeah. Nice little use for our stats. So just to finish off today's episode, I don't think there is any need for us to recommend books, because we have basically recommended all of those.
No.
Do you know what book I'll recommend, actually?
Go for it.
I recommend Project Hail Mary. I've never talked about it before, so I better stick that one.
Who wrote that one now? I've never heard of it.
A little known book. Yeah, I forgot to mention it there earlier. So it's where I wrote this book, like.
Oh, but that's it. I think when you're that passionate about a book, you feel like, it's nearly one that it's so personal to you, that you nearly would think.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those ones that when I see people are reading it, I get excited, but then I'm bracing myself for them to say they didn't enjoy it, because I have to, like, mentally prepare myself for people not to love the book as much as I do, which is absolutely okay, you know?
Yeah, and I'm going to say that's why I haven't read it yet.
You don't want to let me down.
Yeah, I'm afraid to let you down.
That's okay. That's okay. You're just minding me. That's fine.
Yeah.
So just to end off today's episode instead, we are going to very quickly go through what our reading or bookish plans and hopes for 2023 are. So Claire, do you have any particular reading goal for next year, or things that you want to change or do more of in terms of books?
Yeah, so on Storygraph, I've put that my reading goal is 60 books. I'm not particularly pushed about whether I do or do not reach a reading goal. I genuinely just want to keep enjoying reading.
Yeah.
Because I think you can get lost in reading a book for the sake of it and not necessarily enjoying it.
Yeah.
And that can put me off picking up the next book then after that. I would love to read all of the Tired Mommy Book Club picks. I read 6 of them from last year, so I would love to be able to say that I read every single one that was chosen in that year. And as well as that, then I've decided that I'm going to tackle the book club picks for the 1,000 Hours Outside book club, which is new this year, and they have a book every month, which is going to be all about, getting outdoors more, different activities that you can do. So I'm assuming they'll all be non-fiction works.
Okay, yeah.
Which also ties into a thought that I was having where I wanted to read one non-fiction book every month. All of these are random thoughts. They might not come to fruition whatsoever.
I'm sorry, it's on the podcast now, so if you say it, it has to happen.
It has to happen.
I'll be coming back in 12 months going, Claire.
I'll do my best just for you. Yeah. But I think you'd like it, because you were saying that you were interested in the 1,000 Hours Outside stuff as well. So if you want to read the books,
I will be
tag along. Yeah. We can get an accountability thing going. I know that 1 or 2 people have been in touch with me about those books, and yeah, we could keep each other going throughout the year.
No bother.
If you so wish.
No bother.
Yeah.
For me, I think I set my target today for Storygraph at 75 books. I should read that amount. However, who knows what the year might bring. Things might go totally skew ways. And I mean, once I'm reading, I'm going to echo your statement or sentiment that I want to read for enjoyment.
What was your final tally for 2022?
I'll check that there now. I think it was 177. 177, I'd like to say.
Like, that's mad.
It was. But yeah,
and you've got such a good memory. You remember what you've read. I find that extremely admirable.
I do to a certain degree, but then I remember that. But then you asked me what I ate yesterday, and I'm like, food? I don't know. So this is what I said. In the first chapter, I can be very book smart, but not very life smart.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, so I definitely want to shop my stash more. Sharon Levy actually mentioned this the other day on her stories. I remember watching all the beauty blogging videos on YouTube and the blog posts years ago when it was kind of a bigger thing, and shopping your stash was a big thing. Where at the start, on a Sunday evening, you'd go through all your stuff, all the makeup you had, put together a little makeup bag for the week, and that you would try and use that more so to use up what you had. So I need to do that too, to be honest. But definitely for my books, I'm going to shop my stash a lot more this year. So I would love to do more in-person stuff this year as well. And I would love there to be more Cork-based book stuff. Now maybe I need to start following
yes,
more, we'll say bookshops and stuff, their social media, and being more diligent with checking things like that, because I know we'll say Waterstones has events. We probably are missing out on bookish stuff that is happening because we aren't looking in the right place for the information. But I would love there to be more stuff in this neck of the woods.
Actually, and that's something that we have discussed ourselves. We have a lovely Cork Bookstagram community. There's a lot of people in the south of the country that enjoy reading. We've got people that have joined our Cork Books to Crew group from a lot of southern counties, not necessarily just Cork. And yeah, there's an audience here for anybody that wants to organise bookish events down this end of the country. Yeah. We're all for it.
Maybe we'll have to get on organising some ourselves. So are we going to give any sneak peek into what our plans are for the pod for 2023? Is there anything we can kind of say?
Yeah, we're after being approached to sign up for a reality TV show. And
I was just looking at you going, are we? Really?
I don't know what sneak peeks we have to give.
What's coming up?
Oh
my god, that's so funny. we'll eventually calm ourselves down. Oh God. Okay, so now that we have calmed down and my hopes are dashed that we are not actually doing a reality TV program, what have we...
Living with Lucy.
That's my child. My 3-year-old. What? What have we planned for 2023? So we obviously will be doing the monthly read-alongs, and if you didn't hear it, we will be doing Paper Cup by Karen Campbell for January. What else have we coming up?
We have some lovely interviews coming up, some with some well-known bookstagrammers and some well-known authors and booksellers as well, which I'm very excited to delve into. I can't wait to hear what it's like to be the person. It must be like being Willy Wonka or something, because you're just granting the wishes of people, getting their books in for them, and so we have a good variety of bookish people kind of lined up to talk to. It's all very exciting.
Anything else you want to say, Claire, before we finish up?
No, just I hope everybody has a fantastic new year, and that you continue to stick with us if you've been enjoying the podcast thus far. We can't wait to share what's coming up for the rest of the year with you, and we've really been enjoying engaging with everybody on our Instagram page, which is Another Chapter Podcast, with full stops between all those words. And it's been an absolute pleasure so far. And thank you for allowing us to be a part of your reading journey in the year ahead.
So, Shine for this episode of Another Chapter. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of Another Chapter podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to keep the book conversation going. Thank you to Helen Becerra for the graphics, Mark Neville for the mixing, and to each of our contributors. Music is Make It Work by All Good Folks.
Don't forget to follow along on Instagram at Another Chapter Podcast. We'll see you there.